I know our old buddy Steve Keim is working part-time for the Volume Sports with Colin Cohwerd, and I saw he was going to be talking to Colin in relation to injured quarterbacks, and I'm like, let's see what Steve Keim has to say. And while he did touch on the fact that they lost Carson Palmer on an 8-1 team, and he didn't bring up Kyler Murray, thank goodness, but he did have some kind of choice comments as it relates to, I don't know, NFL franchises that opt to choose a defensive head coach over an offensive one. Here was Steve Keim with Colin Cohwerd on the Volume Sports Network.
If you're going defense nowadays, Colin, if you're going defense, and I know there are some outliers out there, but if you're going a young defensive coach nowadays, he better be a special leader.
Right.
Like a game changer.
Like a game changer. A special leader.
Yeah,
he's
right.
He's got to be a game changer.
Right. Oh, man. Can we stop giving this guy a platform? When you said I thought he's going to take your order at TGI Fridays. I thought that's where you said you saw Steve Keim pop up because he has no business being an analyst, being an expert on any platform. He's just I don't want to hear from Steve Keim any longer. I'm done hearing from Steve unless Steve Keim is apologizing for the downfall of the Arizona Cardinals. I don't care at this point. I really don't. I don't care what he has to say. Is that a shot at Monti Ossenfort or Jonathan Gannon?
Yes. It's also a shot at TGI Fridays, which is choice.
Right. I don't know. I don't care what he thinks. He hired both a defensive guy and an offensive guy, and guess what? They sucked. He hired Steve Wilks. He was one and done. They hired an offensive guy in Cliff Kingsbury. He sucked. He's gone. He's out of here. So it comes down to leadership. It does. I mean, it absolutely comes down to leadership. When you look across the board and you can look at like how many offensive coaches won on Sunday and Monday and how many defensive guys won on Monday and Sunday. It comes down to leadership, and it doesn't come down to, if you got a bad team, you'd rather lean on an offensive guy than a defensive guy. Or if you want to get to the top of the mountain, you need an offensive guy to get there, because there's no statistical evidence that's going to point you in either direction. I mean, you've got Bill Belichick, Mike Tomlin, Pete Carroll, who are a trio of the most consistent head coaches in the NFL the last 2 decades. What side of the football are they on? Defense. He just doesn't know what he's talking about.
Well, he chased trends, right? Like they had Bruce Arians, and that was a good hire. Right. But then Steve Wilks, they were chasing. He had brought up Mike Tomlin before. They wanted to find another Mike Tomlin, and that didn't work out. Right. So then what happened? Well, he saw Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay in his own division, and he said, I have to have something like that, but I'm going to go shop at, the bargain bin and get a guy who was just fired by his alma mater in the college ranks. He was a coordinator at the collegiate level. I'm going to get Cliff Kingsbury. Like, he was always 2 to 3 steps behind the trend instead of just like, he says this, which is tongue in cheek.
Well, anytime he tried to be innovative, he was wrong. Like, as far as these hybrid players that he kept on picking in the first round and then incorrectly putting them on the field and deploying them as, Hassan Reddick as an off-ball inside linebacker, and same thing with Zayvon Collins and Isaiah Simmons. He couldn't get it right. He's not an innovator. You're right. He's a trend follower. Right. So he's sitting there in his Ugg boots. He's drinking pumpkin spice. He's got his flannel on, but it's already out of season.
Yeah, he's doing that in February, March, when the rest of us have moved on. Although I haven't. I drink it year round. But it is funny. He always used to talk about, we got to get our own version of Patrick Willis and Bowman, right? He saw that in the vision. I want that. So he goes and he drafts Isaiah Simmons and Zayvon Collins, and that's not who they are. That's not who they'll ever be.
Sean McVay, he goes and gets, bargain bin Sean McVay.
How about this? When he got jumped for Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson, he doubles down the next year. I made a mistake. I wasn't aggressive. Let me go get Josh Rosen. Mm-hmm. So he's always a year or two behind. So he can play Mr. Hindsight is 2020 on these podcasts and shows now because he had a couple of hits, but it's just like, this team right now, and it'll be ironic if and when Colin asks him if he's got the stones to about the Cardinals rebuild, like they're literally tearing it down and going all in for 2024's draft because of the mess that you created. Like Cliff Kingsbury, for all his faults, he didn't put together this roster. Vance Joseph didn't put together this roster. They had to gut the house, and he gave out contracts to D-Hop that didn't age well and draft picks that are going to be out of football soon. I mean, it's a disheartening place to see that guy on TV consistently. And at the end of the day, I do think that was a shot on the Cardinals. Like, hey, why your new GM, my successor that everybody loves? You don't think Steve Keim hears that locally and nationally that everybody loves Monti Ossenfort? Yeah, you're actually dumb for hiring a defensive coach, and let me tell you why. He's got to be a special leader, a special person. It's like, come on, Steve, get out of here with that.
Right. It's like when somebody would see something they like, whether it's like the new car, but then they go get the off brand and they're like, hey, look, I got it. It's like, no, you didn't. You got the Daewoo instead of the BMW. I don't know how you think that's the same. I'm tired of hearing, like, anytime I see his face show up on a feed on social media or on YouTube. I mean, early on, I was like, okay, is there going to be any signs of attrition from this guy? Is he going to show any kind of remorse for how things ended here? And he doesn't. He seems to have he seems to just kind of cherry pick and just kind of focus on where his successes were instead of where his just profound, like, huge failures were with it, that cost this organization. I mean, it's costing me at least a full season's worth of competing. Like, I really like what I saw on Sunday, but, like, realistically, like, what they had to do this offseason to kind of clean up the mess left by him, it's going to cost them the ability to contend for probably a playoff spot and really have to continue to reshape things after they cleaned up his mess.
That's why, like, if you talk about, like, Rod Graves compared to Steve Keim, I know Rod didn't have the postseason success and the longevity, but I mean, Rod put together some draft classes that Steve Keim could never touch and kind of set up that initial run of 2013 to 2015 with Bruce Arians. I mean, Fitzgerald, Dockett, Anquan Bolden, Antonio Smith, Carlos Dansby. I mean, those are Rod Graves picks, right? At the end of the day, those were the keys that drove this team into the 2010s. And I mean, the biggest thing is Steve Keim was always kind of cashing out his 401k. I like to tongue-in-cheek make fun of Bo because he's very conservative with his 401k, but Steve Keim's the opposite, right? He pulls all of his money out. Let's trade for players. Let's trade for guys like, the trio that they traded for last fall that barely played for this team. I mean, it's one of those instances in which, like, there's nothing left and you literally have to you have to file bankruptcy, which is what the Cardinals are doing, and you have to rebuild your credit score and start from scratch. And so that Ossenfort is in a very, I would say, beneficial position because, again, everything looks better by comparison to Steve Keim. And I'm sure we put our homer hats on for Ossenfort time and again, but legitimately, this franchise punted on the draft for 10 years. They literally looked at April and said, it does not matter. And there's a reason why the roster looks like it does right now.
Right. I mean, it was lottery picks and sometime. I mean, I think he hit once maybe with an Andre Ellington in the 6th round, but outside of that, like those late day 3 picks, there just wasn't. They didn't have a shot. Like sometimes he had 5th round picks, sometimes as high as a 4th round pick, not even make the roster at a training camp, which is inexcusable. As
Dorian Johnson,
Dorian Johnson, Pittsburgh offensive lineman. And then you've got, guys, he's taking lottery. He's trying to cash lottery tickets in the 3rd round where Monti Ossenfort and crew, they envision every single round in the draft as guys that can help you out immediately.
Yeah.
Shit, they started a 6th round player who played 100% of the snaps on Sunday.
Etrell Clark has a chance to be better than any 6th or 7th round pick Steve Keim drafted.
Yeah.
I mean, like, he was gifted the opportunity, and give him the credit, to take Jalen Thompson in the supplemental draft. But if you put Jalen Thompson aside, which is an outlier scenario, and you say, look at his day 3 picks of the draft, I mean, it's Marco Wilson and Chase Edmonds, and that's about it. In 10 years of drafting, being in charge of 10 specific separate drafts, unbelievable.